I don't think there's anybody here. All right, welcome to our very first blab. Maybe we got to make that say blabcast, don't you
Oh
think?
yeah, yeah.
If that's a blabcast, that'd be way better. So I am Joe Salsihai from Stacking Benjamins, and with me is Kathleen Selmans. Actually, I'm with you because you are the host.
That's true. That's true. I'm Kathleen Selmans with secondbenjamins.com and fullprofitblogging.com.
We're trying out blab because we've never used it before, and we thought, well, you thought, not me. What the heck? Why don't we go ahead and use blab this time?
Well, yeah, the first time's going to be ugly no matter what, so why not try it on these Friday talks?
I know. And I'm sorry, Anne, if you end up seeing this, but I'm going to look at us on the pictures. I'm not going to look up here at the screen. Anne, our biggest critic. Anne.
And our number one fan.
Man, Anne. All right, so let's talk about November. Man, things are changing. We'll talk about the podcast first. I think we can finally say that the changeover to the new format for the podcast has been successful.
I think we can, yes.
We definitely bit off a lot. So here's what happened for everybody watching is as I look over to see if anybody's watching. Not something you usually had to do when you were doing the Google Hangout, but here,
no, nobody ever found those.
I know, really. So here's the deal: is that back in August we decided to change the format to go to a 6-week production schedule. And so let's take that piece by piece, and maybe we won't have time to get through everything update-wise, but the first thing was 6 weeks out deciding what the theme is, and that's been hugely successful, like way successful, planning out like our calendar. Our calendar is now way beyond 6 weeks. We were planning mid and late February earlier today.
Yeah, it's been really nice because then we're ahead of the podcast. The podcast doesn't rule us.
Yeah, we can tell people, you know what, we have this theme. This is why we want you on. Instead of just, hey, who's our guest going to be next week? You know, call me crazy. And we've gotten great support from our listeners about that too, about how they appreciate the fact that there's going to be a theme for the entire week, which is good. And sometimes the theme's a stretch. Like this week, as we're recording this, the theme is dirty, funny money. So, you know, it's a little bit all over the place. And on Wednesday, we're going to teach kids about money. So it just kind of is a juggling act, but I enjoy having the themes. But then the 5 weeks out, we now are writing the pieces, and that started off good. It's gotten a lot better as we've thought about ways that we can make sure we incorporate all the tools that are on the website in our answers. We weren't doing that at first, and that was a huge problem.
Yeah, so a lot of the Second Benjamins podcast is done last minute so that it's fresh and whatever. But to those of you paying attention, Doug, for example, doesn't write his own trivia. So what we're able to do is plan out the trivia, make it funnier because we write it and we let it sit for a week and then we go back to it and see things we hadn't seen before. Then yeah, we're able to pull letters. We know what we're talking about. Because we have these themes planned out. If we have an investing themed week, then we're going to pull investing themed letters so that everything kind of goes together.
It was also better for working with our sponsors because our sponsors we have, because of the fact that we like what they do, we're not just looking to them for financial support. We actually want people to use these tools, and being able to integrate Magnify Money and SoFi more into the show. I think, and we've gotten letters about this too, about people feel like it's less commercial, even though what's funny is it probably is more commercial because we're sending people more often to SoFi and Magnify Money, but we're sending it in a way that it's a part of the show instead of an interruption to the show. And I think that's been pretty good too.
Right. Nobody wants to be sold all the time, but
Right.
People need the tools that we recommend, especially when they're asking for them.
Right. The part that has been difficult has mostly been on my end, and there's two parts. The first one is that during the same time, I was hoping to get an engineer up and helping us, my 16-year-old nephew. And while that's going okay, at first we were waiting to decide what software we used. And then once we decided what software to use, the learning curve on that software has been brutal. Just, oh my goodness. And the show's sound quality, was bad enough that we actually had to punt on an episode. We had one scheduled episode that didn't go off. We did bleed a lot of listeners for a while. And only in the last 2 days have we seen the levels come back to the same arc that we were at before. That arc started last week. We hit bottom probably about a week and a half ago. And then, which was maybe about 1,400 listeners a show less than we had been at before. It was
yeah.
It was way ugly. And, but now it definitely is picking back up. I don't think that's all the same people coming back, by the way. I think it's new people because of making sure we have relationships with people. Like we're always thinking about making sure that we have relationships. There's 2 new ones. We're doing this thing with Farnoosh Torabi, which is fantastic. November, raising money for charity. But then also we started working with U.S. News and World Report. And I think that actually, we were told ahead of time that might not be a good idea. And I think if you're a blogger, it might not be a wonderful thing. Sorry, Stephanie, working at U.S. News if you're watching this. But bloggers told me it wouldn't be good, but she gave us the opportunity to actually do the podcast as a piece of U.S. News and World Report. And man, we saw a jump. And I don't know exactly who it's attributable to, but I'll bet a lot of that's U.S. News and World Report.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was a good thing. Maybe it's good for bloggers too, but a lot of times people put their best content on U.S. News and World Report. And so if somebody does click over from U.S. News to your blog, they're going to go right back to U.S. News because it's much more polished and it's got a bunch of variety. So the idea of having a short podcast episode, in addition to some written content for the Stacking Benjamins brand, has been great.
Yeah, yes, because that podcast is as good as the Stacking Benjamins podcast, except it's only 5 minutes long. So it really is just a bite-sized taste of what we do on the show.
So if you're interested in more, check us out, and people do.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think initially for now, once a month is enough. We'll see if maybe we want to do that more often. They're already open to having us do it more often. We wrestle with that piece, though, about giving stuff away, right? How much stuff do you give away for free to a name that's way bigger than yours to support their brand versus your, when does it really help your brand? I know that Will Wheaton just wrote a piece recently about that, about Huffington Post asking him to do stuff for free and telling him, well, hey, it's going to be great for your brand. And he's like, grocery stores don't accept my brand as payment. He really needs to get paid. And I think there's a huge difference between Stacking Benjamins and Will Wheaton. And in terms of, we're way better. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Well, we have a better podcast.
Until Will gets one.
Yeah, right. Well, there is that. But I do think exposure does help as long as it doesn't get in the way of what you're trying to do. So if producing the 5-minute podcast for US News took as long as it took you to create an entire episode, then it's probably not worth it.
Right.
But, in terms of the effort, reward, payoff, I think it's worth to keep doing at least once a month.
Right. And 2 things about it. OG and I do it at the end of a taping of a regular episode. And because it's only 5 minutes long, we're already rolling. So we just keep it rolling for another 5 minutes. Not a big deal there. And then we don't use the new editing software for it, which is way more complicated. We use GarageBand. I mean, it's very simply put together. It's the way that we're used to putting stuff together. So it definitely doesn't take that much time. It's actually longer to write the written piece that goes with it than it actually is to do the podcast part.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that part was a struggle. The sound quality was a struggle, and then secondly, the on the same note, the editing software. Oh, I know what the other thing was. The other thing actually was because we became so scripted. I used to think about the humor of the show. And what's funny is that in August, when I really started thinking about scripting the show and making it so that they were consistently good, I didn't think about funny. Outside of Doug, we talked about Doug's funnier than before, but OG and I are not as funny. And that's more, and that's a different type of funny. It's more improv. So when we're recording the shows, I'm thinking about time. I'm thinking about the content level. I'm not thinking about funny. And so now I've had to go back and I've had to start watching comedies, listening to comedy podcasts, reading comedy books to get the improv part back that we had. Because we actually got a great review, which was that the show's not as edgy. And I kind of agree,
Yeah. And I get, and I understand both sides of that, because the more you're focused on technical, the harder it is to be funny.
Right.
But if we're going to have a top 5 investing podcast, we need to have a higher sound quality than GarageBand can give us.
Right. Well, and, Chris Hardwick said this on The Nerdist, that, you got these people with cat videos that get 1 million views on YouTube, and he looks at them and goes, oh man, 1 million views? How come I can't get 1 million views? And I do this all the time, and some kid with a camera, just has it. And then he realized there's a big difference between hitting it once. That's probably a one-time thing when you do a cat video, versus producing content that's good enough all the time that people continually want to see that. That I think is a real skill. And I think you can't have a podcast. You can teach a scripted podcast to be edgier. You can't have a podcast that just is winging it and expect to have consistently good shows all the time. I think that there was no better move than what we did. Now it's just taking the scripting and making that so rote, making it something that we do all the time so much that it becomes background and we can focus on the improv all the time. I think that's going to be the way to go.
I agree.
Yeah.
Speaking of, since we're doing a November update, I wanted to talk about goals. When we started working together, I put our goals on a pretty piece of paper. Now I can't see you, but here it is. So we have goals for our different platforms, and one of those we hit this week.
Yeah, we actually made it to the top 5 in investing, the investing category. We hit it. We didn't stay there. Yeah, we don't have the listener base yet to stay there.
No, not yet.
Yeah. So we still have to get back to that goal. Right now we're number 8, but if we can stay lodged in the top 10, for now, that'll be great. I mean, even last week when we saw that our dip had finally stopped and we were coming back to the places that we were before we made the big format change, that was pretty cool. But the format change, I think allowed us to stay at number 14 all last week. I was surprised that we just stayed there, because usually we go 14, then 25, and then 85, and then back to like number 11. And then we one day we're 11, next day we're 85, and we're back and forth. But last week we were 14 all week. And now this week, the first half of the week, we were number 4 and number 5, mostly number 5. And then today we slipped back to number 8 at the time that we're doing this. But if we can stay top 10 all week, that's a great move in the right direction. In fact, I'm looking.
I agree.
Yeah, looking up right now. Another big goal that we had, though, Kathleen, was courses, and making sure that we have a full slate of courses for people to take. And we've made some great strides there in November, through the month of October. We did not do the live Stacking 101 Benjamins course. That didn't happen. Because OG's schedule was so busy. I was in the weeds with sound quality. You were creating other classes. We were actually trying to fix the Stacking 101 course also, which we can talk about another show. But big, we were juggling a lot in October, so that live course was
PTSD from all that course stuff.
I know. But coming up, though, the start of the year, we're going to do a Save Half course. Talk about that.
It's going to be so awesome. So one of the things that is our cornerstone is that, at least the Stacking Benjamins philosophy is that getting out of debt is just step 0 toward living your financially free life. And a couple years ago, I read an article that said you should try to save half your income. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. I have credit card debt. I have my student loans. I have all this debt. And I'm paying all this money toward that. How am I going to save anything? And then the author of the article wrote back and said, actually, paying toward your debt is savings. I did the math, and I was making about $33,000 a year, and I was already saving 47% of my income in terms of debt repayment. So I thought, well, if I can do that at an income level that isn't enviable, then I can do that. Then I can continue to do that going forward. And so can other people. So we're going to help people learn how to save half, learn how to figure out what half is, where they're already saving toward, and give people a roadmap and motivation to go from there.
I'm so excited about that. We've worked on some strategic partnerships there. Looks like we're going to work with the guys at Tiller, who do these
really cool spreadsheet.
Yeah, awesome spreadsheet programs. So people get to use that for free during the course, and if they continue, they'll pay Tiller. But if they don't, they're going to get spreadsheets that they'll be able to track all this stuff really easily with. Not something that we made, but somebody that's already doing it has made. That's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
We're also doing later in January where we are going to do the live courses again. So those will go, and so we just started working on that. We got a lot going on, man.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. We're working toward all these goals.
I know. So what is our specific goal for courses?
6 by FinCon 16.
Yeah, I'll have no hair by then.
Me too.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. All right, I think that's going to do it. We had a couple people join us. Greg, Scott. It says we got 5 people here. I only see 2 of them, but welcome to our very first blab, and we'll be back next week stacking more Benjamins.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.